All right, good morning, folks. So my name is John Messner. I am the chair of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. Welcome today. I'd like to open the February 14th, 2025 Colorado Produced Water Consortium meeting. Happy New Year. We haven't met in quite some time. When is the last time we met, Hope? October. So it has been quite some time. Lots of action that's been going on, I'm sure, in all of our different spaces over the last few months. Excited to be here again together. We've got, a relatively light agenda today. And, part of the reason that our agenda is a little lighter today, we talked at the end of last year about wanting to engage at the beginning of the year in strategic planning with the consortium and start reimagining what we're going to do over the next year or two with the consortium and the consortium work. We've done so much over the last year and a half as a consortium, so many different deliverables that were part of HB 23-1242 over the last year. We'll talk a little bit about that today and kind of celebrate at least the steps that we've taken up until this point. But a lot of our prescriptive requirements associated with the work that we're doing as a consortium, we've accomplished. We've got one or two other things that we still need to accomplish that's was directly prescribed by HB 23-1242. But then moving forward, we control our own destiny as far as what we want to work on as a consortium and what our strategic plan is going to be over the next year and a half. And so while we're not going to dive into that strategic planning today, I do just want to bring that up and have folks start thinking about that, because at our March meeting, and I'll talk about this perhaps a little bit later as well, but at our March meeting, we are going to go into strategic planning, and we are going to start thinking about, what does the consortium look like 2, 4, or 5 years from now? What are the things that we want to be working on? What are the topics that the Colorado Produced Water Consortium should be working on and taking the next steps on? So an opportunity over the next month for folks to get their thinking caps on and imagine what this consortium is going to be over the next year or two. So again, welcome to today's meeting. I'll go in a second into a little more depth about what we're going to do today, but those are some initial thoughts for folks to think about. We've got a couple of housekeeping things that we need to do here quick, and I think the first housekeeping thing is to acknowledge our existence by a roll call. And so why don't we start with Tracy and go around the room and just indicate your name and the seat you hold on the consortium.
Good morning, Tracy Kozlov, Deputy State Engineer and Governing Body Member.
Kyle Davenport, Assistant Attorney General, not on the consortium, counsel to the consortium.
John Messner, Chair.
Tessa Sorensen, she, her pronouns, Energy Liaison for CDPHE, that's the Department of Public Health and Environment, and Governing Body Member.
Good morning, Eric Anglin with Occidental Petroleum, representing in the experience and expertise seat on the board.
Doug White, NGL Water Solutions DJ, representing expertise.
Thomas Bullock, Colorado State University, representing CSU and all the good research we do there.
Emma Pinter, Adams County Commissioner, she, her pronouns, representing local government on the board.
Thank you. Mark Hefta with Chevron, representing the industry on the Front Range.
John Heil with the ECMC, representing one of the governing body seats.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm the DNR intern for the Department of Natural Resources, EDO.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Herron. I'm the Communications Director at the Department of Natural Resources. I'm not on the commission.
Hi, I'm Arthur Kepsel. I'm with the ECMC and just will be presenting today.
Good morning, Aaron Ray, Assistant Director for Energy Innovation in the Executive Director's Office, Department of Natural Resources.
Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. I'm Erin Sidlacco, the Assistant Director for Research for the Colorado Produced Water Consortium.
Hi, I'm Emma Schmidt and I am Hope Dalton's Administrative Assistant.
Thank you, Emma. Hope Dalton, Director of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium.
Okay, and we've got some folks online that are joining us, and so I'm gonna call you out as I see you on the list. So Barbara,
Vasquez, representing Western Colorado Alliance Community Development and the Environmental Group.
Michael.
Hi, everybody. Mike Friedman from Earth Justice on one of the conservation NGOs.
Jolie.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Jolie Bronner, she, her pronouns. I am in an environmental justice seat.
Clay.
Good morning, Clay Terry, representing a seat relative to expertise in produced water.
Doug.
Good morning, Doug Overton for local government, Rio Blanco County.
Harmony.
Harmony Cummings, an environmental seat.
Michelina.
Michelina Pollock, I'm the Executive Director for the Energy Council representing San Juan Basin Industry Seat.
Zahi.
Zahi Cap, Professor at Colorado School of Mines representing higher education.
And I want to introduce Carmia Woolley, who's a new member from of the consortium. She's representing one of the federal government seats. And so I'd like to give Carmia a second to introduce herself and welcome to the consortium.
Good morning, welcome. Like Commissioner Messner just said, I'm Carmia Woolley. I am a state lead in the Colorado State Office. And I oversee matters pertaining to all federal oil and gas development in Colorado, specifically looking at the surface. So I look forward to participating in our continued discussions and reviews. Thanks for having me.
Carmia, and welcome. I think I missed Joe Ryan. Maybe Joe stepped away. Did I get everyone else? Anyone else I missed? Okay, well, welcome to the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. We've acknowledged our existence, and so I'll hand it off to Director Dalton for a little bit of housekeeping and announcement.
Thank you, Chair Messner. Well, I'm going to hand it off to the Superstar Administrative Assistant, Emma, to tell us some more about the building. Thank you, Emma.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I hope everyone's doing well. Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Good morning. And good morning to the Zoom. Sorry, I'm kind of hidden back here. I am actually a student at Colorado State University. I'm a senior right now, so it's really cool being down here. It's a very innovative and beautiful campus. Erin and I actually went on a tour and we got to pet some mini horses, so that was pretty cool. But I wanted to go over some safety information from the building just so that we have that. All right. So just in case, the building does have an automated warning fire detection system. So if there is a fire, an alarm will go off. If there is a fire, we are going to exit our room and head down the main stairwell. Once we exit outside, we would go to the North Terra Plaza and we would wait there for firefighters. There are fire extinguishers outside between the bathrooms and by the elevators, which also, by the way, the bathrooms are just outside this room. There are area of refuge locations, and these are the areas immediately adjacent to the center elevator and the areas by the south and west stairwells. There is a area of refuge button, which will call a monitoring service, and anyone unable to evacuate will be put into communication with firefighters. I think that is it for fire safety. Perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna pass it back to Hope.
Thank you, Emma. So, did you have something? I can see. So for housekeeping and announcements, well, I'm really happy to see everybody. Thank you for making the trip out here. And I did want to share that several consortium members were on a webinar on Tuesday. It was the Turning Waste into Resources webinar, and it was hosted by Water Education Colorado. I was there. Chair Messner was there. We were on the panel along with Grant Tupper, who used to be on the consortium, and Harmony Cummings was also on the panel. Jolie was in attendance in the audience. So I invite each of you to share anything you'd like to share about the Water Education Colorado webinar.
Asking us to share. I thought it was a good webinar. I mean, Water Education Colorado. Water Education Colorado is a great organization for all things water, and I think that they had some interest in some of the work that both the Colorado Produced Water Consortium is doing, as well as what is happening in the produced water world in the Western region. And so I thought it was a good conversation, lots of diverse perspectives on produced water, and appreciate the opportunity from Water Education Colorado for us to be able to present. Go ahead, Jolie.
Thank you. Yes, the webinar was wonderful. The panel showed up, did a great job. There was some great conversations, but I really loved the questions. I think a lot of the questions were very insightful and thoughtful. The chat was super active. I ended up downloading that. We actually had a viewing party for community members at the Alliance. We had about 8 folks who showed up to watch that. And then I also want to share that there was like over 85 people in attendance at the height of the webinar. And so just so we know, I just wanted to share with everyone that people do care about this work, and they are showing up to webinars in the middle of the day on a Tuesday to look at this and learn about it over their lunch. And so that was my kind of call to action and urge when I did speak to everyone was, hey, come comment at our meetings, come send us public comment. We want to hear from you, because they were very active in that webinar. So hopefully we'll get some of that, but I think everyone did a really great job. Thanks for doing it. And I think it had some great questions raised and work we still have to do. So thanks, friends.
Harmony?
I am grateful for the opportunity to have been part of the webinar, because I think there's a lot of perspectives that are often left out, especially on the environmental front in these spaces, advocating for disproportionately impacted communities and the like. For me, in the consortium, in the rulemaking, in the webinar, really highlighting the need for improved data access, and data harmonization is key to all the decision making that we are trying to do here. And it also showed to me a webinar is something that we were wanting to put on, but we don't have the capacity. This is something that the general public knows very little about, but like Jolie said, there is a want to learn more. There are a lot of people from all over different water spaces attendance. I encourage people to check it out. And I just want to highlight, if we as consortium members can provide more tools to community members about what produced water is, I think it's imperative. I know Hope's done a great job of starting a storyboard, but would love to see that be able to get across the finish line to be a tool that we can actually share with people, because we created a one-pager fact sheet, but we need the consortium and the state agencies also to be stepping up in this spaces, because we're small grassroots organizations, and we definitely need to be getting more information out to the public.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up to anyone else that may have attended. Seeing no hands online and nobody jumping for the mic. Thank you all for participating in the Water Education Colorado webinar. On Wednesday, I flew to Houston and gave a panel discussion with New Mexico and Texas consortia on what we were all doing, and they're doing some really cool things in New Mexico and Texas. We presented to the Produced Water Society, which is mostly industry professionals were in the audience. I was excited. There wasn't a lot of attendance at the presentation prior to ours, and the room was nearly full when we gave our presentation. There's several bills in New Mexico and in Texas that are being discussed by their legislatures this year on produced water. So it's a very exciting time to be in the produced water space. So that's all of my announcements, and I did want to personally welcome Carmia. Thank you for taking that federal government seat. I really appreciate your participation. And now I'm going to hand it off to Thomas. I'll invite you up here to Thomas agreed to host today's meeting, so I'm going to give him some time to welcome us. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have slide forwarder tools? What do you have to do? Okay, that's cool. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for coming all the way here. It's an hour from Fort Collins, where the main campus is. CSU Spur was, I guess, built and became active about, what's it, 3 years ago now? 3 years ago, I guess, right? And it houses 3 different buildings, as you see when you walk around. As a CSU Spur Terra building, where we do a lot of soils research. There's a VITA building, where we do everything from basically veterinary science to equine science and a lot of other things. And then there's this building that you're in here today, which is CSU Spur Water Building. And my colleague, Professor Sybil Chevelle, will talk to you a little bit more about that and even give you a tour of some of the labs that she's operating in. So welcome to CSU. I was asked as a board member to just give a brief overview of some of the projects that have been going on in my group over the years. And then Sybil will talk a little bit about some of the work that she's doing on similar and relevant topics. So with no further ado, we can change to this presentation. We can see myself. Or can they see it? They cannot see it. It's not up there.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that.
But it is a pretty cool building. It's amazing, and there's a lot of opportunities, I should say. There's going to be a lot of industry here for collaborative opportunities. Denver Water is also housed down here. So there's a lot of academic industry partnerships going on in this building. And you'll see some of them, some case studies on that later, I know for sure. And then, of course, there's this opportunity for industry to get access to our excellent students too, right? So meant to be a pipeline for students into industry, and also to get some of the urban students interested in agriculture, right? As we're closer to Denver, and we are doing a ton of cool research related to urban sustainability, water reuse on rooftops, and a lot of other things. So I'm not going to give a research presentation as such, but I am going to go through some of the papers that we have published over the years and just hit on some subjects. And then I think later in the season, I might go in and give more in-depth research presentation related to reuse of produced water. So yeah, I'm a board member, professor at CSU. I've been up there for 20 years now. I have about 9 PhD students and 4 postdocs working in all aspects of water and soil. And so, right now, I think the consortium is at a point where we are starting to consider, should we consider reuse of water outside the oil field? We obviously, both in the Permian, I mean, we basically recycle all the water that we can, but there's more water being produced than it can be recycled within the oil field. So, and then the water, of course, needs to be managed. And in the Permian in particular, we have seen a lot of problems related to seismic activity when we do the deep well injection. And then when we do more shallow well injections, there's been reports of expulsion and blow up phenomena related to that. So I think we had there's an unprecedented need for adequate management and reuse solutions beyond deep well injection. And reusing oil field produced water for maybe agricultural uses seems to be a promising opportunity, especially in water scarce regions, which is true for anything west of the 98th meridian. Of course, there's a lot of concerns because, as we all know, produced water, of course, contains, oil derived contaminants and also some hydraulic fracturing additives. So when all that oil and water comes up from the ground, it will, of course, contain salts and metals and organic pollutants. So therefore, we need to, of course, do in-depth analysis of all the produced water's effects on both soil and crop health in order to help guide treatment requirements. A lot of the early work in my group was focused on basically just diluting the produced water. The reason we didn't treat the water but diluted the produced water was because we wanted to see at what level do we see potential effects, whether it's like in this study here, we went up to Wyoming, we sampled treated produced water that was allowed to be discharged into rivers and streams based on NPDES permits. And so we went in, we did a paper on the chemical characterization. After that, we went in and we did a paper just focusing on analyzing the same water from a toxicity perspective. And the conclusion for that paper was, yes, sure, there's certainly constituents left, even though there's an NPDES permit in place. But most of these contaminants were significantly reduced just within a few, about 100 yards from the outlet. I think one of the conclusions from this paper was that in addition to acute testing, we always need to think about chronic testing. And this paper showed that, yes, there can be elevated mutagenicity associated with the discharge point. We also investigated downstream from these effluents up in Wyoming. We investigated the potential impact of using wetlands as a way to polish the water. So a lot of that effluent water from these discharge points went through natural wetlands. And the conclusion from the wetlands work was basically that wetlands are very efficient in terms of being able to remove those surfactants and biocides. In fact, more than 94% of these constituents were effectively removed either via biodegradation or sorption. So they could be a nice combination with more advanced treatment, taking advantage of nature. Then after we had done some of that work, actually worked in collaboration with our own Aaron Sedlago, who sits here, we had the first study where we started to irrigate wheat plants, which are the most common crop in Colorado. And we started to irrigate these wheat plants with diluted, it's very important, diluted produced water. We did not treat yet, okay? And we looked at the impact of this diluted produced water on the yield and crop health of wheat. And obviously, as you increase or decrease the amount you dilute this water, it did have impact, especially on the crop yield. And some of the constituents that we found was most inhibiting was, of course, the high salt concentration. And when you reach dissolved organic carbon levels higher than 5 milligrams per liter, most of that is petroleum hydrocarbons. We started to also see maybe an additional effect of petroleum hydrocarbons in addition to the salt effects on crop yields. But that's not surprising. We have known for hundreds of years that salt, is not good if you want to have a high yield. Again, we didn't treat, we just diluted here. And of course, I mean, if we ever are going to use any of this produced water in an agricultural setting, we want to make sure the economics make sense, right? There's no farmer who wants produced water if the yield are cut in half. Then we asked the question of, if we had some hydraulic fracturing additives left in this water, can any of these additives be taken up in the crop? Especially, can they be taken up in the edible part? And this study here that was published a few years ago, we more or less irrigated a very high concentrations of additives, both surfactants, biocides, corrosion inhibitors, and others. And certainly, some of these compounds, if you are adding them in high enough concentration, they can be taken up in the edible parts. But surprisingly, the take-up was rather limited. And you would never see the high concentrations that we tested here under under a natural setting. So obviously, since they can't be taken up, it just again indicates we cannot just dilute the water, we need to treat the water before we reuse it in an agricultural setting. We also looked at so that was the impact on the yield. There was impact on can these contaminants be taken up in the crop. Other questions we have been asking is if we add this water to an agricultural soil, can it impact the health of the soil? Can it impact this microbiome that is surrounding the crop plants? And in this study, we saw that if the water is not diluted enough, you can certainly see a shift in the soil microbial community. And we also saw that the soil health. Soil health is basically an indication of the quality of the soil in sustaining a strong and healthy crop, high yields. Again, most of this was due to the fact that the salt concentration in many cases just limited the growth due to sodicity. And then, of course, I'm always trying to ask questions related to what is that we're missing? Are we missing something? You know, we might be able to treat this water, but are we missing? I hear that all the time, especially when I talk in other places, but also within the consortium. Is there something we should be thinking about in order to make sure we don't leave a legacy of pollution if we start to reuse this water outside the oil and gas field? And I was talking to a colleague one day in plant biology, and this whole idea about immunity, immune system function within crops came up. And I said, have anybody ever looked at how water quality can impact the immune system of a plant? And he said, no. And so, of course, we went in, we set up experiments in the lab where we either irrigated the tap water or different levels of diluted produced water. And then after about a few weeks, we incubated these leaves either with a fungal pathogen or bacterial pathogen. And then basically what we looked at was how well can these plants fight these pathogens when you compare wheat plants or irrigated tap water versus produced water. And the findings here were that if the water quality goes down, then the plant's immune system is compromised. And so we do need to think about water quality also from the perspective of sustaining a strong immune system, because the immune system within these crops are used to fight off not only pathogens, but all kinds of diseases. So diluting the water obviously is not enough, right? And I think we all know that today. We need to do some type of treatment. So can we treat this water and potentially use it for various end users that can benefit from this water? And so I was the lead cartographer for a big roadmap that was sponsored by the National Alliance for Water Innovation. It's up there. In that we are testing and evaluating all the different types of non-traditional waters that could potentially be used for irrigation or drinking water for cows in that roadmap. And then together with a lot of my colleagues, especially from the School of Mines, Dahi, James Rosenblum, and others, we started to develop papers and research focused on how much do we need to treat this water depending on the end use that we are considering. And so we had this joint paper a few years back where we started to think about treatment from the perspective of who is the end user. And basically, the framework that we're laying out in this paper is focused on, depending on the end user, there will be different criteria to the level of chemistry and toxicity that will be acceptable. And basically, if we see too high toxicity, well, we'll go back and optimize the way we treat. Maybe we have to step it up. Maybe we have to do membrane filtration or add in another pre-treatment step. And you basically go back and forth until you're happy. And then you put a lot of checks and balances in place so that when you are starting to treat water, that there will be red flags going off if suddenly the water is not treated sufficiently any longer. So I like the framework that we laid out here. After that, we started to actually treat water. This is a study I was a part of out of China, where they have a big industrial treatment plant with all the bells and whistles of pre-treatment and membrane filtration. And we looked at how the treated water, in contrast to diluted water, in contrast to just tap water, impacted all aspects of agriculture, whether it was the metagenome inside the crop, the way plants are able to cycle nutrients, and so forth and so on. And basically, the take-home here is, yeah, I mean, if you pay enough money, you can treat it to a standard that will allow for sustainable and safe reuse. Going forward, you've seen this picture before. James and Dahi and myself and our colleagues, collaborators at NGL, we went to Texas ALA and we for the first time demonstrated that we can treat the produced water as it comes out of the well. And just next to that produced water well, James and Dahi treated the water. I was standing and I was taking all this water. I had a 1/4 acre plot available to my disposal, and I grew sorghum. And I grew sorghum in these 4 quadrants here, and 2 quadrants had sorghum that was irrigated with treated produced water, and then 2 quadrants that was irrigated with drinking water. And right now we're working up all the data related to how did this water impact the soil quality, the crop quality, what ended up in the water after James has treated it. Not much, honestly. We've seen the data is in right now. We were able to reduce the salinity from about 130,000 milligrams per liter to about 500. And to put it in perspective, the Purpose River that's down there has a TDS of about 6,000. So we're like 6 times lower salinity than the Purpose River that is flowing through these areas. And to put a little more in perspective, to grow crops in a sustainable fashion, you often need to be below a TDS level of about 2,000. So we're doing really well. All the data is coming in. I might be able to present on that later in the season. And here's just the last thing, the last slide before Sybil Chauvel talk a little bit about her work. We just submitted this paper, and I just put that up here. It's in review, but that's actually a link here so you can see what we're doing. This paper is actually focused on the DJ Basin, conventional water. It's a high quality water. The TDS of that water from these old wells, about 3,000 to 5,000 TDS. And there's a big focus on the economics, because like economics will drive whether or not we decide to reuse, right? So we not only determine how toxic this water was, the chemical composition, but also what would it take to actually treat it in order to allow for using this water for discharge into streams, the stream augmentation, use it for drinking water for cattle, or for crop irrigation. In general, the conclusion is we just don't produce enough water to sustain a big agricultural field out in eastern Colorado. But if you think about using this water to sustain a dairy or a CAFO, or maybe natural, basically just develop maybe a nice natural area with wetlands that will attract birds, and you can go out and shoot some birds or deer that will be attracted to this wetland. I mean, we like to hunt. That was actually probably a better use of this water here, and also drinking water. A lot of dairies right now are coming to Colorado, being built because they're escaping California and Texas and immigrating here. It's a little cheaper from a tax perspective. And so we see actually an increase in dairies, and they need water. And so we could produce water out in eastern Colorado where there's no other access to water. It is a potential opportunity that I think we should at least consider. I think that's it. And thanks for your attention. Happy to, later take some questions over the breaks. Thanks to Professor Sybil Chauvel. She's in environmental and civil engineering, or civil and environmental engineering at CSU, and she will be talking to you now.
Great. All right, thank you, Thomas. And building off of a lot of the work that Thomas has done, and we're working actually in collaboration with Marquette Chevron, and we're looking at one of the things that Thomas just mentioned, which is to take the water and produce water and make use of it to kind of restore natural ecology and look at native vegetation and potentially constructed wetlands to both purify the water as well as provide some of those ecological benefits. So this is a project that's here at the Spur campus, and other collaborators at Colorado State University are Jennifer Buslow, Ken Carlson, and Mark Paschke in different departments. We have soil and crop scientists, as well as Ken is another environmental engineer, and Mark is in ecological restoration. So this, like I said, is a project that's at our Water Technology Accelerator platform, which we'll be giving a tour of a little bit later this afternoon, I think at the lunch break, yes. So this lab was constructed as part of this hydro building where the mission is really around conducting water research and outreach. And Water Technology Accelerator Platform had a really different mission than what we have at the Fort Collins campus, in that the intent was to kind of foster these collaborations with utilities and industry partners, and hence the partnership that we're really excited about with Chevron to work on this study. And it's a larger scale lab, intended, flows around about 1,000 gallons per day, or what the systems are designed for. So it's really thinking about bringing systems from the bench scale into kind of this pilot scale testing, and thus, fostering these collaborations with utilities and industry partners. So excited to show you that later. And that's really what led, I'm showing the indoor part, but there's also a large backyard portion, which is right behind us. And we have a lot of test plots back there. So I'll show you around those pieces as well, but that's really kind of what enabled this partnership. And I'm just going to talk briefly kind of about what we're doing with this project. So looking at the treated produced water, because as Thomas alluded to, we know that we need some level of treatment for this water, and thinking about these uses to really promote natural vegetation and ecological restoration. So, using the water to irrigate an area to restore native vegetation, and Jen Buslow is a huge expert in native vegetation, who's on the project. And then also looking again at the constructed wetlands as a way to even potentially just manage that brine water, attract species, all those kinds of things, do the hunting like Thomas mentioned. So we have Chevron's already got in place these different treatment systems. So there's a basic treatment and then reverse osmosis treated water. And we can look at how we can make use of these waters, or potentially blends of them, because maybe reverse osmosis is a little bit overkill for this particular beneficial use. So we can look at this water, but we can also look at potentially blending some of the basic treated water. So we will be doing greenhouse studies. This is a picture of the controlled temperature greenhouse that is across the street in the Terra building, where, like Thomas mentioned, there's amazing research going on with respect to food production systems, and our School of Agriculture is doing just a lot of great work there. And then we have some of the facilities in our TAP lab as well. But there's the greenhouse studies, and then we'll also be building kind of mock constructed wetlands to test the water there as well. And those will happen in the TAP lab. So that is it. Just wanted to let people know about this project that we're super excited about. And I think, is this the end? Yes. Okay, so thank you very much for providing us with the opportunity to talk about some of the great work we have going on at CSU, and look forward to the lab tour later in the afternoon.
Thank you, Sybil, and thank you for inviting us into this wonderful building. Everybody has said how beautiful it is and how fortunate they are to share in the research that CSU is doing. So I think it's back to you, Chair Messner.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Sybil, for having us here and sharing with us some of the research that you're doing at CSU, the CSU Spur, and really appreciate that general overview of some of the work that's happening here. So I do want to take a minute next to, well, actually, I think we need to go to Aaron, don't we? Yeah, I'm going to hand it over to Aaron. Aaron Ray. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Commissioner Messner. Good to see everyone. Aaron Ray, Assistant Director for Energy at DNR. I just want to take a minute to recognize this body's incredible work over the last 18 months. Executive Director Dan Gibbs recently presented to the Joint Energy Committee of the Legislature as our SMART Act hearing. And as required by the bill, he reported on the work of the consortium and noted to those committees that this body had completed 8 reports over the last 18 months as part of the direction from House Bill 23-1242. I don't know of any volunteer body that is that productive in such a short period of time, at least not in the DNR world. And so I want to just recognize all of the work that you all have done. I want to recognize the work of consortium staff, Hope and Aaron and Emma, the ECMC team, Arthur and his team that have supported you, but most importantly, recognize all of your contributions, your engagement, your expertise, your commitment to getting this work done, which was a significant challenge. And so on the behalf of the department, I just want to thank you all for that work. And note that you're not done. We have one more required deliverable this year, which you'll hear from Aaron about in a few moments. And then I know part of the goal of setting up the future sort of revisit of the strategic plan is to think about what's next for this body as you sort of wrap up your legislatively directed requirements. What can you continue to contribute to our use of produced water? And I think the presentations you just saw are a good example of the opportunities that you all have to continue to make contributions to the space. So just want to say thank you and look forward to listening to the conversation today and seeing you all again over the course of this year. So with that, I'll hand it back to Commissioner Lister.
Thanks, Aaron. And I would also emphasize that the amount of work this body has done over the last year is astronomical. Volunteer bodies do not produce 8 reports in a year ever. And so congratulations to the team for going through that process over the last year. I do hope as we reimagine the strategic plan and the work of the consortium that we be a little more realistic with our timelines and spread them out just a little bit so that we do have enough time to breathe as we're working through some really difficult topics, difficult challenges, and interesting concepts, that the Produced Water Consortium can be working on. I want us to also just remember, I think at the first meeting, at least my mantra for the Produced Water Consortium is that I asked everyone to consider being curious and not judgmental, and really having an open mind as we approach these topics and listening before speaking. And I think this consortium has done a really good job of that, is listening to the different perspectives, listening to the different expertise, listening to all the different elements that we need to consider when we make decisions around produced water and the work of the consortium. And so I want to thank the consortium over the last year for the work that they've done in that space as well, and hope that we can continue to do that as we move forward with both our work today and as we contemplate the work that we'll be doing in the future. So thank you for that. And with that, one of the things that we did at the end of last year was provide recommendations to ECMC for a rulemaking that's upcoming. That was intended to occur in December, and then was intended to occur maybe in January, and now is going to occur in February. So right now, that ECMC rulemaking on produced water is scheduled to occur starting on February 27th. There are a number of folks that are on the consortium that are parties to that rulemaking and have been providing pre-hearing statements and rebuttal statements and elements associated with that rulemaking. Today's meeting is not the rulemaking, and so I highly encourage us to steer clear from topics related to that rulemaking. There is a forum for that, and that is the rulemaking. And do encourage people that are in the room and online and those that might be interested to engage in that rulemaking process, because your voices are important. And I think that that process will offer lots of opportunities for engagement. And so do encourage you to engage in that process. But the work of the consortium itself, as it relates to the rulemaking, is complete. And so any further discussions associated with the rulemaking should be directed at the rulemaking. And so And I know we'll follow that and consider that as we move forward, but just want to emphasize that both from a legal standpoint and just from, I think, keeping the focus on the things that we need to continue to work on the consortium itself. With that, I don't know how long the rulemaking is going to take. Right now, it's scheduled for February 27th, 28th. Rulemakings take as long as they need to take in order to complete them. And so we'll see what happens with that, but look forward to engaging in that process, and certainly happy to take any questions that folks may have associated with process of the rulemaking, but don't want to get into any conversations about substance of the rulemaking. Barbara, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I may, I had a question for Sybil, if she could come back to the microphone. And that question was the basic treatment. Are you at liberty to share what the basic treatment is and what's left in the produced water after basic treatment before you take it through RO?
So I'm just going to turn this over to Mark, who's, yeah.
Thank you. I guess I wasn't planning, but yeah, thanks again for the whole CSU team. Really excited about getting this study further down the road. Again, we're primarily focused on recycling as much as water as we can, but there's going to be conditions and opportunity where we just it might make sense to use this water for other uses besides recycling, just because of frac activity levels or just where our presence in the field is at any given moment. So yeah, just our basic treatment is what we call it's just removal of pretty much your iron and your hydrocarbons and some mechanical filtration afterwards to get any of the suspended solids out. So it's just what we use in our recycling process for recycling to frac is would be that basic treatment, and then that advanced treatment is that RO to get the TDS reductions. Is that answer?
Thanks. I really appreciated both Thomas's and Sybil's presentations. The research is fascinating, and I just want to thank you for that.
Julie, did you have a question?
I did, and it was about soil health. And so we can share emails if I want to take a deeper dive into it, because I can talk soil all day. So I don't want to do that right now with our time. But when we talk about soil quality and using recycled water, super interested in this topic. Would love to follow up via email or chat about it offline. But are you looking very place-based? Are we looking holistically? Are we using any other sort of soil mitigation, like a mycelium network? Or cover cropping to complement the produced water? Are we doing this on like a baseline of generalized kind of soil, and what sort of soil tests are we doing? We talked a lot about the plant nutrient and kind of said like, and soil health. So just some questions on some of the holistic approach to soil health with recycled water.
So, I mean, we can, I mean,
I could do that in email. Can you share my email with them?
Whether they want to talk about this right now. I think they were sharing just some high level information about some of the research that they were working on. I do think that there's opportunities for deeper dives in all of this stuff as we like reimagine maybe some of the work that the consortium is going to do over the next few meetings. But Thomas or Sybil, if you answer that at a high level right now, go ahead.
First of all,
or they could share their emails with me.
Sorry. So I did very high level, but I just showed the front page, right, of these articles. Obviously, we have a lot in the works right now too, but Aaron said, feel free to share this presentation. There's no secrets, right? I don't know if you need to take signals, right? I don't think there's anything there, because they have those references. And so some of these articles specifically address that question of how does it impact soil health? Is it primarily a salt effect? Is it a petroleum hydrocarbon effect? Does these changes in the microbiome matter or not? Why should we worry? So all of the articles go very, very deep into these subjects. In general, what drives or changes the soil health when you start to use water that has a high salinity, it's the salt, sodium chloride, right? Yeah. Sodium chloride is something we are not only dealing with when we use produced water for irrigation, but also just in general, right? Salinity. And then the other thing is if you had a lot of it's an area, if you had a scenario where it had very high concentration of petroleum hydrocarbons, at a certain level, the petroleum hydrocarbons will definitely impact the microbiome. You actually start to see microbes that are good at breaking down aromatic hydrocarbons, thrive in there, just like you do when if you have an oil spill. Suddenly, all these microbes that love to break down oil, then in heaven, they start to break down the oil, turn it into CO2. Now, the bigger question is, will these shifts have an adverse impact on agricultural production, right? And again, I think I was trying to make clear in the end is we need to treat it. It is not enough to pollute the water. And I think that's the most important comment. Okay.
Thank you so much for humoring my want to deep dive. I will look at the additional resources as we get them. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Julie. So before I hand it off, I think we have maybe some folks that are interested in public comment, and we're going to create opportunity and space for that. But did anyone have any questions about process associated with the rulemaking before I move on? Okay, seeing that, or seeing none, do we have anyone that's interested in public comment? Understanding that public comment today is public comment before the consortium and not before the commission for the rulemaking. So if you have public comment associated with the rulemaking, then that should be addressed at the ECMC commission hearing at the rulemaking. But public comment today, as far as consortium work, is certainly welcome.
For the record, my name is Angelique Rodriguez, and thank you for taking time, for everybody showing up today. It's nice to be in the same room with you all. I had a slide that I had emailed to Hope. I was hoping to get onto the screen, which had, I wanted to share some other research regarding the toxicology of some other studies, some other things that were found. And I will put that in a written form. I'll submit that again in a more in a different way so you guys can have access to that. But regarding that also, one of the things I wanted to question about and ask about was the list that is based on the globally harmonized systems of classification and labeling of chemicals, the GHS, in relation to produced water, which is showing to have quite a list and quite a profound list of GHS classifications of flammable gases, acute toxicity. There, I mean, it goes through the hydrogen sulfide, the benzenes, the toluene, I mean, there's words that I can't even say, and then what those are, like if they're a flammable liquid, if they're a skin irritation, reproductive repercussions. So that will be in the public comment for you all to take a look at some of these other things that are in the waters, more than just salts. As has been mentioned, that is the case, but there is a lot more to consider. Also, one of the other things that I'd like to bring note to is that with all of these chemicals, with all of these different components, that there's a halogenated component that isn't being talked about, and what happens when all of these chemicals come together, because there are byproducts, there are new things that are created that are still yet to be explored. And we talk about the gaps of what we know, they're tremendous. They're really, really large gaps. And so much so that like there is, well, I'll just refer to my notes. Let's see. So basically the data available that we have is, I don't know how we can, how you as a consortium could think about providing public safety and health for us as the public when there is such a big gap of disclosure. How can you discern what is going to be well for us in a spill or an accident when these trucks are on the road or on the field or on site if you don't know exactly what's in there and how these things are interacting with each other and what the repercussions of those are. And so when we look at the transportation, what are the protocols? What is CDOT doing about it? If there's a spill on the road, what are the procedures? Where is the health companion to how these things are being executed in the real-time world when the public is involved? If there's children involved, do we know how to handle these materials of which we don't even know what is in them? So I would like to implore the consortium to really call for some accountability in what is in these waters so that we can be protected in a rightful way, in the way that we deserve, and also to consider third-party research, because it seems, and all the time that I've spent with you, there's a lot of time and a lot of energy focused on what the oil field is doing, and this research is fantastic. I would love to have conversations about looking at micro-remediation, since in the last comments, I gave you quite a list that were correlating mushrooms to some of the things that are in these waters. But at the same time, it's like we need other voices. And more than just us inexperienced people who are sitting there doing their research at night, we need some real experienced expert research on the other side of this, and talk to some of these people in New Mexico, in Pennsylvania, in Wyoming, and what are they dealing with? When we look at these unintended consequences that we're all willing to be like, oh, okay, well, we'll just look at that next year. Why? When we have documentation of people who have already gone through some of these things, and we don't need to have our communities going through some of these traumatic things. And so I would really ask the consortium as they submit these, there's articles based on agricultural components, based on, there's a lot of different things. Basically, I did my homework, and I would invite you to look at some of these scientifically published out of Duke, out of all kinds of different places that are showing some other components than what we're hearing here. And I appreciate what we're hearing here, and I think that someplace there's a bridge for us all to come together. But there are some major concerns, as you'll see on this list, that is there. And one last point I would like to implore the consortium is to, again, to really push our legislative, to invite our legislative peoples to call for that accountability as a state to the industry, to tell us what are in these waters so that we can be protected, because this is a huge disservice, not only from our state, but the consortium and the industry, if this is not taken into consideration and given as a public right to know what is on our streets and what is being put into the waters, and also the long-term effects of the storage, who's accountable for that when things start to break down, who's going to pay for that infrastructure for all of these things. So there's a lot of different questions that still need to be answered. And I would ask that as you review these public comments that I'll be submitting, please look at the articles, because these things are very serious and there are huge gaps that are over and over being acknowledged, that we don't even have the capacity to test for some of these things based when you look at these combinations that are happening with these materials. So, you know, that's really awesome that you got all this done this year, but my heart tells me that of all the things to rush through, this was not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the public comments, and I think they're good comments, particularly with the last deliverable that we have associated with HB 23-1242. I can assure you that this consortium did not rush through them because we felt like we had to rush through them. We rushed through them because the legislators, through legislation, directed us to accomplish things by certain dates, and so we had to accomplish those as a consortium. And so I'm proud of the work that we did within the time constraints that we were offered by the legislators. But I think your comments are good comments, and I really appreciate you continuing to engage with us. And I think they'll tie it well into the discussion that we're going to have today about deliverable 9. and the literature review that'll be associated with that. So stay tuned for that conversation. I think next on the list, we've got Arthur Kepsel is going to provide some information about ECMC data and the efforts around collecting that data as it's associated with the requirements of HB 23-1242 as well.
Is this on the, is this on the, is it on Google Slides?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good morning. There we go. Is that better? Yes. Good morning. I'm Arthur Kepsel. I am the ECMC Environmental Data Group Supervisor. And so what I was going to talk to you guys about today is the information that we've been collecting regarding produced water and the Form 7 and 47, which we use to collect the data. So as probably many of you know, in January of 2024, we started collecting some of this data. And I'm going to talk about the Form 47 first. So the Form 47 is the form that we use to collect the quarterly data. And with that, we collect the volume and source of fresh water acquired from various sources, including industrial, commercial, municipal, or ag water that have now been used in oil and gas operations. And volume and source of all recycled or reused water that were used in oil and gas operations. Volume of produced water disposed of from the oil and gas location, including disposal method and location. And volume of produced water that is removed from the oil and gas location for recycling or reuse in oil and gas, including uses by other oil and gas operators. And the total volume of all produced water from the wells at the oil and gas location in each month of the reporting period. These reports should describe the entire life of an oil and gas location. So that includes drilling the well, site construction, completion, stimulation, and during production. And operators have 45 days from the end of the quarter to submit this report. And so we were kind of right at the end of the reporting period for Q4 from 2024. So we do not have all the data yet for 2024. And we're still don't have a lot of data yet. We only have about a year's worth, and we started collecting this in March of 2024 last year. So we have the previous quarter's data. So during 2023, we did start collecting some of the data in 2023 as well. And we had about 60 operators report in 2023, and we had about 80 that reported in 2024. And my next slide here, figure 2, shows the amount of forms that were received. So we had 63 in 2023 and about 250 in 2024. But these forms can contain information across an operator's whole statewide operations. So there is not a Form 47 for each location. And next we have, this next slide just shows the reported volumes of water kind of by each year and by quarter. And this is, see, the green is the disposed water, dark blue is fresh water that was brought onto the location. And the orange is the incoming reuse and recycling produced water that was brought on. The light blue is outgoing reused and recycled water. And then purple is the water that was produced on the location. Figure 4 displays the percentage of freshwater used in hydraulic fracturing reported in 2023 and 2024 by water source. And so you can see that generally the highest source of freshwater used right now in oil and gas is coming from industrial sources, and some is reported as commercial. And that is true. And small amounts have been attributed to agriculture and commercial.
Right. Do you mind just describing what those colors are?
Yes, the orange one, orange that shows the greatest percentage that's used is industrial water, so sources that are permitted as industrial versus those that are permitted through the DWR as agriculture, commercial, or municipal. And in general, oil and gas should be using water from industrial sources or that is permitted to be used as an industrial water. Did that answer your question, Tracy? Okay, sure. And this is the amount of produced water that has been reported. The volume of produced water is measured in barrels, and this is reported on the Form 47 for years 2023 and 2024. And so we reported roughly 200 million barrels for 2024. And then we also have it in figure 7 here broken up by quarter. So you can see the amount of produced water kind of by quarter.
200 million barrels? I'm sorry, what was it?
Yes, about 200 million barrels. 190 is about 199, the graph. Yes. And this is a slide kind of displays the disposed water. So the first slide is the relative percentage of disposed water by method. So in this one, it's similar to what we've displayed before, where you can see that about 70% of the produced water is disposed of through UIC wells. And some goes to pits and very little goes to surface discharge. And by far the highest percentage is going to the UIC class 2 wells. And then figure 9 displays that same information by quarter. Also, this slide displays the recycled and reused water. And this is water that was reused and going to another operator. So this is sharing the produced water to be used at another operator's location. And we only had about 50,000 barrels last year that was reported as being shared with another operator. And then figure 11 displays that kind of information by quarter as well. And Form 7W reports produced water by month on a well by well basis. And so this should have volume of fresh water used downhole, volume of recycled or reused produced water that's used downhole, and volume of produced water that is produced from a well, and the volume of produced water removed from the oil and gas location for disposal, including method and location. And also volume of produced water that's recycled or reused in another well at the same location. And so again, we'll start out with kind of the frequency of reporting that we received. So figure 12 is a count of operators submitting approved forms. So we had about 137 separate operators that reported. Then we have the approved number of forms that we have. So we had 473 in 2023 and 1,488 in 2024. You can also see the number of wells that were reported by years. We had about 25,000 wells reporting in 2023 and about 32,000 in 2024. And this displays the water volumes of the various waters I kind of discussed in the beginning there. The dark green is the fresh water that was brought up, that was used on the location. The black is the recycled water that was used on the location. The orange is the produced water that went to disposal. And then the light blue is produced on-site reuse, and the dark blue is produced water that was used off-site. And we have that for both 2023 and 2024. So we also looked at the water that was used downhole, which included fresh water used as well as recycled used. And in figure 16, the light blue is fresh water reused in the, it's fresh water used for hydraulic fracturing. And then the gray color toward the bottom is the recycled water that was reported as used for hydraulic fracturing. And figure 17 displays the volumes of fresh and recycled water used downhole, just in the graph for 2023 and 2024. This also displays that as well, as a relative percent. And we can see right now that the fresh water is used predominantly in the oil and gas field. And this is just a little deeper dive into the produced water. This has the volume of water produced, reported by the Form 7W by month. So as you can see, the water is produced, most of it is still disposed. Some is going to offsite reuse and on-site reuse. And also figure 20 displays the volumes of produced water and how its ultimate fate, I guess, best way to describe it, where some was disposed, some went to on-site reuse, and some went to off-site reuse. Just the numbers. Oh, orange, sorry. Orange is the disposed water, light blue is on-site reuse, and dark blue is off-site reuse.
What would off-site reuse?
Like going to another operator or move to another pad to frack wells on a different pad. And this slide goes into the disposal of produced water. So this describes the different methods of disposal. So within this, I did include the key up there to make this a little bit easier, hopefully. But
So I hope that at some point you'll share these slides.
yes, yeah, you guys can have. Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
all of the things that are being presented today will be provided to all the consortium members as well as the public, so.
So this describes the various ways that water is disposed in quantities. So most of this, as we can see, just to set the methods of disposal. So you can kind of see the various methods of disposal.
And maybe Arthur, talk us through the different colors on this one as
Yes,
well.
that's what I was trying to get through there. So the highest quantity is the dark blue, which goes to central disposal wells. So again, that's kind of, as I discussed before, most of the produced water goes to disposal through UIC wells. And then the pink is the next most common one, and that's also class 2 well, so it's a commercial class 2 well. And then the light blue is a central disposal pit. So a very small amount of less than 5% was reported as going to pits. And then the purple color, or purple or maroon, is the surface discharge. There was a very small amount about 3 to 4%. Anybody have any questions specific to the disposal?
It's not really legible.
Okay, well,
Thank you for
yeah, we'll see if we can get that fixed for you, so it's a little bit easier to read. Then our then reused produced water has volumes of water produced in barrels that was reused on site and off site, and the light blue is on site reuse, which was about 1 million barrels in 2023 and 1.4 million in 2024. The dark blue is offsite reuse, which was reported as about 11 million barrels in the remainder of 2023 and 23 million barrels in 2024. We also display this as a relative percent. So you can see of the produced water that has been reused, most of it was reused offsite, about 90% in both years, compared to less than 10% was used in 2023, and about 6% was used in 2024.
Arthur, we got one question.
Okay.
Thank you. You might be getting this question because I could read that last slide, but
okay.
On the last slide that you just had up, that's the what are the offsite uses? Are they going to be listed at a different point, or because offsite could be a million things?
I think offsite could be a million things. So I don't think we know specifically what the offsite use was, but it could be used for things like moving to another site to do completion operations on another location.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I could, because like, even if it's that kind of offsite, there is, and I know we're trying to like steer clear of the rulemaking, there are air quality implications for all of that and the truck traffic and pipelines. And anyway, thank you.
This next slide is water used and water produced.
All right, Michael Freeman has had his hand up, and so I want to give him a chance to ask a question too. And I do want to emphasize that this presentation here, this is data straight from the forms. And so this is form information from the forms that were required to be developed and filled out by operators as per HB 23-1242. And so I think what Arthur's trying to present here is just straight data from those forms so that folks have that available to them. And I think there's a lot of different ways to look at that data and to interpret that data. And I encourage operators, consortium members to take a look at this information. And if we want to dive deeper into this at a future consortium meeting, I think we should. But I think that this gives us a general idea of the type of information that's getting collected because of the legislation that was created, and create some perspective for us. And so I think that's what Arthur's trying to get through here right now, is just that raw data. So Michael, go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Chair Messner. And Arthur, thanks for this information. I had a question actually about one of your earlier slides, and it has to do with how complete the data set is here. I noticed that in terms of the number of Form 47s that were filed, it went up considerably from 23 to 24. And I was wondering if you could comment on, in terms of the numbers of operators that are submitting these reports, how does that compare with the number of operators who are filing well completion reports or production reports? So are we confident that this data is that all the operators that are generating and using water are submitting these forms, so you're capturing it, or is there still a gap there like that I think there was last year?
There is likely still a gap. Our production group is looking at that to kind of try to determine it. If we have a data gap, if there are operators that are not submitting, and they will address it with our enforcement group if we're feeling like there is large gaps or operators that are not submitting the required data.
Great, thank you. Any sense of how big it is? I mean, are we talking about 80% compliance, 90%, 50%?
I am not sure yet about the compliance. That is something we're still looking into.
Thank you.
Arthur, I got a quick one for you.
Okay.
Tremendous amount of work here thus far. So really cool to see all the data coming together. Two quick ones. Is it they come in as PDFs and you're having to scrape the data from a PDF?
No, we have an electronic data deliverable that's in an Excel format.
Cool.
So it's uploaded that way.
And then is this data at all parsed out by county or region? I mean, imagine there's, we can do it in some way, but at this point, this is just all the data in one place, which is great.
This is just the aggregate right now.
At some point to kind of break it out.
Yes, we can break it up by county and region and things like that as necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah, Barbara, I bet we're gonna call on you here in just a second, but Tessa's got a follow-up question to that question. 1 second.
Hey, Arthur, Tessa Sorensen, CDPHE. Along the same lines of that, is it easy to combine that for overall parent operator companies? Because they have different operator numbers for different subsidiaries of a parent company. So I want you to be able to answer that before we move on.
So you want to see the data aggregated kind of by operator and all their subsidiary, kind of the whole shooting match for one operator.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Barbara, we're ready.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear being called on. I really appreciate this data. As you know, we're really hungry to see data basin by basin with the objective of being able to have data to support setting targets appropriate for each basin based on current water use, in particular the peons. So if there's any way, even after this meeting, you could help us with a preliminary look at that, I think everybody around this table, virtual and physical, would appreciate that. Thank you.
Coming an environmental voice. Can you clarify, can this be broken out by basin? I heard you say county, I heard you say operator. I did not hear you say basin.
Well, Harmony, as you know, we have a lot of issues trying to break things down and to fit into the current model of what a basin is. So it is very difficult for us to break it down by basin right now.
And one of the slides showed water usage and then also produced water being the highest number there. But we're hearing in this room over and over again for the DJ Basin that there's not enough produced water to equate for the water needs. And that's why it becomes so incredibly imperative to have this information by basin. So I just want to, that's in the legislation. We've been saying it for 3 years now. I don't know what else we have to say to help get there, but anything and I'll say it here because I've sent it in emails. I would love for you guys to bring me in for a day, 2 days, 2 weeks to help you as a user of this data, to help make it more user-friendly, streamline this process, have ideas of how we can better harmonize in it. It's literally in my name. I would love to be helpful in this space. And I have said this over and over again and have a hard time getting taken up on that offer, but here it is officially on the record once again. And then I would love for you to please just go to the slide that showed the total amount of produced water for 2024, please.
apologies. If you are having trouble seeing the slides, they have been emailed to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So there was a slide that showed the total amount of produced water, and the number I wrote down was 198 million barrels for 2024. And I think it was early on in the presentation. That way. When I pull up the ECMC dashboard for 2024, that number is over 400 million. That's off by over 100%.
Like I also said, I have not got everything yet. We don't have Q4. And also in emails, you have asked about that and you've been answered about why.
And I understand the answer, and that's why I'm answering it here again. And I've asked, can we please have a conversation about it? Because these answers are not making any sense. And when I would understand if the data was maybe off 10%, 15, but to be off over 100% when we're trying to make decisions and rulemakings as consortium members, and this is why I bring it up over and over again. In a number of variety of spaces, we need the data to be able to make information.
And again, this is just what has been reported to us. So I am not, didn't try to break it down in any way other than just, this is what we've been collecting so far.
It sounds like some of the consortium members know where to find this, I guess. So just for the group to, as a reminder, where do we find this information if we were to just access it ourselves?
I'm not sure that they have put out anything that has the data from the Form 7 and 47 yet, or the Form 7W to the 47, where it can be accessed directly. We do have information for the Form 7, which is reported in our production reports.
So then a follow-up on that as well. When you do have that available for us, can you also make it in a downloadable form so that we'll be able to download it and do some analysis on our own, please?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for that. And I think the public facing piece ends up being an important piece. And I think, again, ECMC staff are working hard to try to get that as functional and forward facing as possible. Carmia, you had a question?
It's a comment, but to add to that, for future discussions, it would be great if we could see how the data are presented by the type of well, so whether it's horizontal, vertical, or directional, the targeted formation or formations, and then whether the well is coal bed methane, oil, or gas. That would be very informative. Thank you.
And Barbara, is your hand still up or do you have another question?
I have another question. Thank you
Okay,
very
go
much, Chair Messner. And it's more of a comment than a question. We're not here to shoot the messenger, and I hope you understand that. But I would encourage you to carry back into ECMC the sense of frustration from members of the consortium about the paucity of data and the inability to analyze by basin, which is so critical to the kind of work we're doing here. And that falls to enforcement, I'm imagining. So thank you for braving the consortium with this early look at the data. I'm sure it's not as complete as you would like, but time is of the essence to give us the kind of data we need for decision making. So thank you.
Welcome. We will get on, try to keep it coming in and get the operators that have not been reporting to report.
I think you still have a few more slides to go
Yes,
through.
I got a couple more.
We jumped a little.
We're almost through it. So my next slides deal with the Form 7, which is how operators report all their all their production, including gas, water, and oil. So these are water used in what was produced based on the Form 7. So figure 29 is counts of operators submitting the sevens, and there was 261 in 2023 and 238 in 2024. And then we have the distinct count of Form 7. So this is how many forms we actually received each year. And the last one is the count of wells that were reported. So in 2023, we had about 49,000 and just a little over 48,000 wells reported in 2024. And this is a comparison of oil, gas, and water. So the light blue is oil, dark blue is water, and orange is gas. And the gas is actually plotted on the scale to the right, and it was calibrated to kind of match the oil and gas, so or the oil and water, so we don't have a huge disparity when you're looking at the graph. And this did break down a little bit by water that's produced by gas or by oil. So the orange, figure 33 in orange, is water associated with gas. And then blue is water associated with oil for each year. And then this is the same information, but we calculated the gas as barrel of oil equivalents. So you could kind of compare it better directly with the amount of oil and amount of water. And Selena Demi helped put all these together for our data. And that's all I have for you. I guess we can take more questions if there's more questions.
Thanks, Arthur, for providing the information. And obviously people are super interested in this data. There's a very data interested group.
Yes.
So I think that's a good thing. I think it's important that we do get data, and I think that's probably an important reason why this requirement was included in the legislation. And so I know it's new and early in that data collection process, and the challenge of ensuring operators are compliant and are providing the information, ensuring they're providing accurate information, and then being able to compile that into a digestible format to meet the needs of all the different people that may be wanting to use this data is super challenging and time consuming. And so appreciate the work that you and your team are doing. And we'll continue to be interested in this information. And perhaps as folks are thinking about what does the consortium work on over the next year or two, deeper dives into data sounds like might be one of those topics, although we're not making those decisions today. We're just thinking about things that we might want to include in the strategic plan over the next month, but it sounds like that may be one that percolates to the surface as well. So I want to thank you for that. We can do a couple of questions here, but we're half hour over right now, so just heads up there on time. And I really need to use the bathroom here pretty soon, so we'll be cognizant of that as well.
Tessa Sorensen, CDPHE. Very quick question for you, Arthur. Just for context, because it was kind of covered early on in this presentation, we were trying to decipher from afar. How long has produced water volumes been reported? Were they reported annually prior to this requirement in 23? And so, we know the oil and gas numbers have been around for a long, long time, but the water necessarily hasn't in this format. So how has that changed and when? Because this is obviously not a lot actually of data time-wise for the requirement.
We do have a lot of water data associated with the Form 7, but it is only produced water, just whatever was produced. So we do have water data going back quite a ways. We also have the amount of water disposed in that same that we've received by the Form 7 as well over that same time period.
From your perspective, what are the first and foremost, things that we could do to improve the data and the data access? What are your biggest challenges?
I think we could make it accessible. I think we just need to talk to our internal IT group and have them, put it out just like we do with our other production data.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna take a break. 15-minute break, be back and rolling by 10:55. We've got food, drinks, stuff out in the hallway, right? So please, go get some.
We actually have a room if you need to take a phone call or.
There's something I wanted to fix that I saw.
Sorry guys, real quick, the room that you guys can take a call or anything in, and I apologize that I didn't mention this earlier, it is the Rock Creek room, room 205 next door.
I don't think I let Aaron. I just need to get rid of that W. One of them.
Computer is.
I don't think I just sent it to Aaron. I don't think I let her edit it.
Yeah. Yes.
I can fix it. I'll fix it. Oh, well, we'll fix it later. I'll have it. I didn't log in.
Started. If folks are in the hallway and can hear me, if you come trickle back into the room, that'd be great. So next on the agenda, we've got Dr. Aaron Sidlako, who's the consortium's assistant director for research, because it's going to provide us a concept approach for deliverable 9. I'll remind folks that deliverable 9 is the last deliverable that the consortium was required to do as per House Bill 23-1242. That was directed by the legislators to provide this deliverable. It's due by, I believe, July 15th of this year. And Aaron's going to provide us some information on it. I do want to note that this deliverable was a requirement by the legislation, and emphasize that, as Aaron is beginning to look at this approach, and she'll go into more detail with it, but it really is just a literature review on the current research that is out there on this particular topic. And so it doesn't necessarily set us forward with any particular goals. It doesn't create an expectation, but rather is a literature review and an evaluation of current research that is being done on this topic, as Aaron will line out, for the consortium to have as baseline information for its decision making as we continue the work of the consortium. So with that, I will hand it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Chair Messner, and all of you for being here. I hope you had a nice break. I'm feeling all refreshed. I'm Aaron Sidlako, Assistant Director for Research, and here we are at deliverable 9, the last deliverable set by the bill. And today I'm just presenting our approach to this deliverable, analytical and toxicological methods and evaluation tools for produced water treatment and potential use outside the oil field. That is a mouthful. So for the sake of time and sanity, I'm just going to call it analytical and toxicological methods. The directive states that by July 1st, 2025, we need to evaluate analytical and toxicological methods employed in produced water treatment and assess tools used to evaluate produced water and its potential use outside the oil field. Our meeting timeline isn't quite finalized yet, but we should have some flexibility to handle the drafts in March and April, March or April, and May or June, with a firm due date of July 1st. So ideally, we'll be reviewing this final draft in May. Our research approach involves identifying analytical and toxicological methods and tools used to evaluate produced water and its potential for use outside the oil field. So in other words, how are other places that are doing this doing it? To do that, we'll conduct a literature review, interviews, and case studies, essentially examining how other places are handling this. Luckily for us, while our consortium has been focused on policy in the last year, other consortiums have been focused on research. So we can really leverage work from Texas, New Mexico, Wyoming, Oklahoma, and the PA, where a lot of research and pilot studies have been conducted. As stated in the bill, our focus is on identifying analytical methods currently used to characterize produced water and toxicological methods that are protective of human health and the environment. This includes examining key constituents, current methods being used, and identifying research gaps. We'll also assess tools and frameworks used to evaluate produced water applications outside oil fields, including socioeconomic assessment tools, environmental impact evaluation methods, and decision support systems. Deliverable 1 actually has a pretty nice summary of some of these social tools, and thank you again to all of you who contributed to that. So here we'll also be identifying some key questions that people are asking about evaluating produced water for potential use. Our approach here is pretty straightforward and involves a comprehensive literature review where we're leveraging consortium knowledge, database searches, data collection and analysis, and identifying research gaps. As John mentioned, we're not making recommendations or drawing conclusions. We're just identifying questions and potential research needs based on the research that's already being done. The first step in the literature review is to leverage the work that's already been done. We're really lucky to have so many of you in this consortium who are experts in this field and have published on the subject. I'll save you the embarrassment of calling you out your names right now, but I know who you are. I've already talked to several of you, and thank you again for your time and interest. And if you haven't heard from me yet, you will in the coming weeks, so heads up. We'll also utilize other sources, including our Deliverable 1 summary, published papers, interviews, and the work being done by the other produced water consortiums. Our database search will focus on states like Colorado, Texas, New Mexico, Wyoming, Oklahoma, California, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, where this water source is already being considered for outfield use. And we'll use resources like Web of Science, PubMed, Scopus, TrackFocus, ToxNet, NIST, USGS, Produced Water Society, and the Groundwater Protection Council. I'm sure there's plenty more out there, and if there's one you love, please send me a reference. Data collection and analysis is just a fancy way of saying we'll gather the information and synthesize it in the report. And these are some of the keywords we're using in the search criteria. We're talking about water use in the United States, and we're using the produced water definition accepted by the state, which includes both flowback and late-stage produced waters. Treatment and use, or reuse, or use instead of reuse if you consider produced water a first source. Outfield reuse, we're not talking about infield use like we have on previous reports. And we're looking not only at places that are doing this now, but also research that's going on now in field and pilot studies across the US. And lastly, the goal of this approach is to summarize the research being done and identify those research gaps, hopefully highlighting some gaps for future investigations. A rough timeline is presented here, and for the first time, we're not working with such a compressed timeline. Yay! We have 5 months, so let's use that time wisely so no one has to scramble too much. I'm presenting the approach today and then have time to reach out to all of you and outside experts over the next month. Ideally, I'll present a first draft in April, incorporate feedback for a final draft in late May, and submit it the final report by July 1st. In summary, I really just want to most importantly thank you all for the work you've done to get us where we are now. A reminder that our task for this deliverable is identifying analytical and toxicological methods and tools to evaluate produced water use outside the oil field. Our approach is pretty straightforward, and I think we're well positioned for success thanks to both the expertise within our consortium and the work being done by those other groups. I think this early involvement in the drafting and review process is crucial, so please do share any critical research you feel should be included. And thanks again for all of you who have talked to me so far about this. That's it in a nutshell for me, and I'm happy to take feedback. Thank you for your time and consideration and your public comment.
Thanks, Aaron. I know we've got some questions. Just to remind folks that the process we've done in the past for the different deliverables is we have an approach that's presented to the consortium. That approach would ultimately have to be approved by the consortium as a good idea for moving forward. The consortium has opportunities to provide feedback to that approach for modification or additional thoughts to that approach. But that action that we take by the consortium on whether or not we think that this is a good approach moving forward, then enables whatever staff person is working on a deliverable to be able to begin working on a draft. That draft, again, then will come to the consortium for additional input, review, and revision before it then goes back to be worked on for a final draft to be presented to the consortium at a future meeting. So three-step process. Doesn't always take 3 meetings, can take more than that, but that's the process we'll be going through here. So with that, open it up to consortium members' thoughts or questions or check.
Thank you, Aaron. Rick McCurdy with Select Water Solutions, and not a question, but a comment, hopefully a helpful comment. When I've been involved in studies in the past, when we've taken a look at the potential to use this water, we need somewhere in there a very clear definition of what we're describing. Because I think what we've heard today, we commonly refer to treated produced water, but there's different levels of that treatment. I think as Mark mentioned earlier, you know, the most common thing for infield reuse is to treat that water to remove iron and suspended solids and most of the hydrocarbons. And then that way it can be reused within oil and gas operations. But as was pointed out by several of the papers that Angelique provided for public comment and some of the studies that Dr. Borst presented up front, that would be that water that was used in those studies. That water is not what we would intend for long-term irrigation or some other purpose outside because it still has salt in it. And we know by and large, that's the #1 problem, not to mention what else might be in there. So we're probably most likely going to go to either some sort of filter permeate like RO or membrane distillation or a thermal process like mechanical evaporation and recompression. So we need to be sure that we cover some definitions in there that when we talk about treated produced water, that means this level of treatment. When we talk about desalinated produced water, just for a term to throw out there, that means it's went through this treatment process and had all the salt. Because that'll help really be clear when we're evaluating these papers as what bucket are they falling into.
Thank you for your comment, Mike. I totally agree. And you're on my list.
Actually, well, this is Sorensen, CDPHE. I'll go in a minute. I want to let Clay Terry, who I think has his hand up first, go ahead and ask a question.
Thank you, Clay Terry, expertise in produced water seat. Just had a question for Aaron. Great approach, I think. The question is, have you considered international resources, such as there's a lot of research in the Israeli communities and Israeli institutions relative to desalination work they've been doing for decades. I just can't assume that they don't have also looked at a lot of the toxicological, ramifications as well. So that they may be a great resource to consider as you're looking at literature. And also, our Canadian friends have been dealing with these problems and these issues as well as we have. Maybe the University of Alberta or other resources may also have context for you.
I appreciate that. I was just trying to figure out a way to contain the scope of it, but you're absolutely right. Some of the best desal stuff is coming out of other places, and some of the best talk stuff is actually coming out of Canada. So I'm open to exploring those things. I just want to stick to regulatory frameworks, I guess, within the US, not necessarily innovations.
Copy.
Thank you.
Let's wait and let Carmia ask her question, and I'll ask mine, and then we can go to Barbara.
Hi, Arian. Thank you so much for the presentation. So as I've worked with industry through the years, I know that treating water is feasible, right? But the main caveat seems to be, what is its intended use, and what is the cost, and is that feasible? Is it realistic? So I don't know if we can tie those things into the research, but I think that those are absolutely relevant to what we might be discussing in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carmia. I agree. And I think that harkens back to what Rick was saying too. This end use part, I think, is a really great way to sort of describe how we're treating the waters. And I don't know that this is necessarily the place for an economic evaluation. Maybe that's another deliverable later, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Tessa Sorensen, CDPHE. Question for you, Aaron. Do you have plans to incorporate or to kind of engage our experts in the state toxicologist's office in the Department of, or the division, I should say, of environmental health and sustainability within CDPHE?
Indeed, I do. I was hoping for another introduction from you, but I've already reached out to Kelsey and Christy.
Easily done. We can make sure that happens. No problem. I'll
Thanks.
pass it to Barbara now.
Thank you, Barbara Vasquez, for the record. I have a question and a comment. The first question is, maybe I missed it. Are you going to include any summary of the legal status of produced water? This ownership of produced water is a bit of a sticky issue, particularly as we envision the development of a third party that stands between the operator bringing the produced water to the surface and potentially a customer downstream, if you will, from the treatment. So actual companies doing just the treatment and transfer.
Yeah, Barb, that's another can of worms, I think. And I think it deserves its own time and space. I think it's going to be one of the gaps that gets shaken out in this literature review. But I mean, if it's in the literature review that people are struggling with this, and I'm sure it is, we'll talk about it.
And there's a case in Texas that is relevant to that question, and wondering if you can't rope in the Attorney General's office to help with that question, because I think it's really important for industry imagining how they could meet the growing targets particularly in the Front Range, where the percent of return to surface is low, and the ability to actually meet the growing targets that are imagined may depend on a clear understanding of that ownership. So it just would be wonderful to have that included in your work. But the comment I'd like to make, and this is, from me personally, and I imagine there's some others that agree, although this is legislatively required, deliverable, and obviously we must and should do it and do it as well as we can. I think we should include high on our priority list the ability to recommend targets to ECMC that are basin or geography specific. It makes no sense that the Piance is being recommended to start at 4%. We all recognize that, and we're frustrated by not having the data to support making reasonable basin-specific targets. So that's one that I think is really, really critical. And then we've had a great deal of discussion in our consortium meetings about the potential opportunity for mining class 2 wells, or the strata that class 2 wells inject into, as a potential source of produced water equivalents, where you've had long-term mixing of produced water that was injected and the regular geological water that was present before we started doing that injection. So those two issues, I think, are really important in terms of timeliness to be able to support ECMC looking at later rulemaking in 2026 to be able to regularize our targets for basins or geographies that make more sense relative to what we know is happening today, and providing potential assurance to front range operators that there is a reasonable source of produced water equivalent to be able to meet the out year targets. So those are my comments. I know, Commissioner Messner, you're talking about strategic planning discussion later in March, but I just wanted to get these out there for others to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. I would say that those are really big topics, and topics that were identified in our barriers to reuse and recycling deliverable that we did. And so thanks for teeing it up for the March meeting. But I think that those are really important topics for us to consider as we think about what does the consortium want to work on over the next year. I'm not sure this is my opinion. And so certainly respect everyone's opinion in the room to have different opinions in mind. I don't know as it ties to deliverable 9 directly, but perhaps are independent topics that need to be addressed by the consortium and identified and calendared in our strategic plan as we look at whatever topic we'll be working on. But it makes sense to certainly look at barriers as one of those topics. And I think those things that you identified were identified as barriers.
Commissioner Messner, thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't suggesting that they be considered under deliverable 9, but that they were, in my opinion, urgent work for 2025.
Thank you, Barbara. Emma Pinter, Adams County local government seat. I just wanted to first reflect the comments on definitions and the need for solid definitions, as well as Barbara's comments on what's going on with the class 2 injection well reservoirs and the standards in there. In looking, I had a couple of trailing questions from this morning, and so I hope that they're germane for this moment. I'm sure the chair will correct me if there's a better forum. But in looking at my notes from this morning, I feel like particularly we need the Form 7 offsite data to be more specific, and I don't know what the path is for us to give direction to get more clarity. My neighbor Thomas was like, that data is just a little too raw for me, and I finally understood something a college professor said, so I felt really good about that moment when we had our hallway conversation. But I also understand it was the data requested at the time, and the forms are being completed to the standard. And so what is our ability to adjust the standard to have more clear data that is useful for our situation? So I don't know if that's just a question I ask into the ether, and then we like say, hey, I'm gonna ask that question, we'll come back to it. Cool, I have another one. One of the things that in thinking over today, as well as our plan for 2025, we haven't really fully discussed, and this is similar to Barbara's question, the need for an evaluation, and I'm reading from my notes here, of analytical and toxicological methods that are used when produced water is injected and how that might inform the extraction and reuse of that source. Because I've heard a lot of comments today about desalination and international and national sources for research, and that's great. But, and I'm not saying that salt is good for plants in excess, but like salt is the least of my worries when we're talking about this water and it's, thank you for the nodding. I love the appreciative nodding. And so at what point, as we're having these conversations, are we going to talk through those standards so that we don't put our own selves in a Form 7W situation where we requested a process that is insufficient to do the evaluation necessary to greenlight or pause a potential reuse?
Thanks, Commissioner. I may have you flesh out that second piece a little more, only because, I mean, right now what we're doing is providing Erin Sedlacko feedback as to whether or not her approach to deliverable 9 is an appropriate approach. That second piece that you mentioned sounds like it may tie to that, but maybe not. And so I want to maybe have you flesh that one out a little bit. The other things that are being brought up here, whether it's by you or by Barbara, I think are actually really important things for us to put into our strategic plan as things that we're going to be working on. So whether that's, providing direction to ECMC on clarification of data or data needs, at least that the consortium has, that ECMC may be able to help us develop, or whatever that may be. So I'm glad that people are starting to think about that stuff. After we provide direction to Erin Sedlacko, Hope is going to walk us through a review of our draft strategic plan that we developed previously, so that we're also setting the stage for the next meeting for that modification of that, and to hopefully incorporate these different ideas that are being brought up here today, which I think are all really good ideas, and I'm glad people are already thinking about them. I mean, I've got 15 things on my list that I want us to work on, that I'll cut it down to 2. So anyway, Commissioner, I wonder, well, I want to make sure that I'm following you with as much as I know, which isn't a ton. And so I want to make sure that Erin's following you, whether she thinks it's something that can be picked up in this literature review and this approach or not. And, or whether it needs to be its own topic at the strategic planning.
Hi. Oh, wait. Hi, hello? There we go. I think I might be conflating in my brain the 3 different things that you requested. Can you summarize?
Well, I mean, they are a couple of different things. And so if it's helpful, I can after the meeting go back and listen to my own comments and be like, here's what I asked. But looking at my notes, it was, and this may be one of the ones I think is not as relevant for you, was a piece around the Form 7W offsite category is too broad.
Yeah.
Industry is reporting to the form as required.
Yeah.
But it is insufficient for our uses. And so what is our mechanism to have that conversation so that we can understand the current state of affairs? Sort of question 1. And then if we are regulating by basin or attempting to provide guidance that ultimately will go to ECMC to regulate by basin, if the data is not structured geographically the way we need it or the way we're intending to regulate, again, the data as collected is insufficient for us to do our work. And then the third one is about things more than salt in our produced water.
Yes, so the third one will actually be included. The first 2, I believe, are beyond the scope of this particular report, but certainly needs addressed.
That may be. And so the third one was just looking at my notes again, an evaluation of the analytical and toxicological methods when you produced water is injected and how that might inform the extraction and reuse of that source. we've been talking about reusing previously injected or stored reservoirs, but given how much we're talking about regulatory changes over time, even 5 years back or 10 years back, our ability to track what's in a body of water is difficult. And the conversation today was primarily about, as I heard it, desalination, which is important, but there are so many more constituents, not a scientist, like bits in the water that could be harmful beyond just desalination.
Yes, so it's ever evolving. And that will be touched on in the report in as far as what other states are doing about it or what other labs are doing to try and develop methods to identify some of these constituents. There won't be any conclusions or recommendations about which methods should be used to identify particular constituents.
Yes, so Commissioner Finch, so I would jump in and say we are very fortunate as a consortium that New Mexico and Texas have been working on this for 5 years. They spent 3 years alone on a risk and tox list that, industry experts, environmental groups, and NMED, the Environment Department has been working on. They call it the NPDES plus list. And so it's standard methods, some non-standard methods. I think it's almost 700 compounds to look at. So surely looking beyond salt as well as, applying targeted and non-targeted. So I'd say we have a pretty awesome breadth of literature, a list to start from at least to then expand upon. And again, I just think between Texas and New Mexico and in this realm, because really, if our focus is on reusing more infield with this outside field, being further down the line. Texas and New Mexico, their main focus is on discharge, and they really are, literally years ahead of us in this space and what they're doing. And there's a really big body of literature, even in the Texas Produced Water recent report, where people are sending in pilot data sets that are all this NPDES list plus. So we're very fortunate in the sense that we got a lot of literature, a lot of data from those states, not our water, different water, but for constituents to at least start from to expand from well beyond the salt side of things.
And just to add on to what James just said, particularly in the area of non-targeted analysis, that's really a new realm that the science is getting into. As he mentioned, you say you've got a list of 720 compounds. You're telling an instrument to go look at that water and look specifically for those 720 and tell me, what did you find? The question is, and this again goes to something Angelique kind of mentioned this morning, is we always ask, what about the unknown unknowns? What if there's 730 compounds in there and we're not looking for 10 of them? That's where non-targeted analysis come in. You tell this instrument to just go look for every single little blip you can find, and then we're going to find the ones we can't identify. We're going to move out here to this database of 400,000 compounds and let AI work with it and tell us, okay, this is what we believe that is. New Mexico has done some great work here. As a matter of fact, they have a peer-reviewed published article out there. I think they found 20 unknown unknowns in a highly distilled produced water. All of them were in the water at the part per quadrillion range. So, but you're absolutely, and I think, Aaron, that is probably something that'll fall into the discussion of the other gaps, because there's really great research being done right now, but I wouldn't say we're at a final point. Michelina?
Thank you, Michelina Pollock. I just wanted to mention, Aaron, and I don't know if it's easier just to send you, direct ideas and suggestions, but when I was reading the potential for use outside of the oil field, we brought this up, I'm going to say 18 months ago, because then it makes me feel like we've been involved so long. But identifying the potential discharge points. So I think if we're going to talk about use outside of the oil field, then we need to look about where it's going to be used. So understanding, what those discharge points look like and the research that has. I just want to include that.
Sorry, Magdalena, sorry for the delay there. I didn't realize I had a. Yes, I think that goes back and also what Rick was saying about these definitions, right? And even through academic papers, they're going to define waters differently and uses differently. So I think it's a really important consideration. And yes, please send me all the emails.
And that just would circle back to like economic feasibility too, which is, I think, a major component. So I'm glad Carmia mentioned that. It's on my notes.
Yeah.
So there's two.
I agree. When I'm going through the evaluation tools, if it turns out that economic analysis is part of those to a large extent, then it will get a place. But this is just a literature review, so it's not going to solve all our problems. And there may be areas that will need delved into more.
Yeah, and I do think like the emphasis on this one, and I think this is good feedback that you're getting from my perspective. I don't think this is it's not gonna solve all the problems, this deliverable, right? But it's gonna identify some things that we may be able to want to continue to work on, and I think that's the benefit of taking this first step. We did this, whatever, 18 months ago, a year ago, when we started ultimately coming up with the recommendations to ECMC by starting with some ground level stuff, a literature review, and I think this is a step one in a multi-step process. And so, but I think that a lot of what at least I'm hearing makes sense to consider in your approach as well. So, Irene?
Irene Andrus. So I would suggest that maybe what we have in this report is a table where we're talking about fit for use. What is the use that it's going to be, the costs associated with it, and also the environmental footprint. And that would probably be a valuable table.
Was that a question? Was that a question? Okay, sorry, I missed it, so I apologize.
Thank you.
So I do want to move on. Do people feel like this is a good approach? Do people feel like their voices have been heard? Are there any concerns with this approach? Understanding people are going to be able to see multiple drafts of this as we move forward in future consortium meetings, but any heartburn with the approach that's being presented here for the literature review?
Just wondering, are we planning to get it published in a peer-reviewed journal? No?
So.
It's a great opportunity, right? To take it through peer review too.
Oh, if my name can be on it.
Okay, so that prompts another question for me, and Chair, if you're like, Emma, great question, not relevant for this moment. In my notes, one of the things that I wrote down as we're looking through the multitude of ways that the new presidential administration is changing research and the National Institute of Health and all the different things and EPA and things that are changing in our nation. I'm just kind of curious if any of the research that we are relying on has been impacted by the federal fund freeze or the federal fund research withdrawal, because I'm hearing, at least in articles and anecdotes at this time, that already health impact, environmental impact, a variety of studies are paused and or their funding has been ended and there's no new funding. And I'm just kind of curious about if we have any thoughts or if it's something of concern for this body that the scope of research available to us, given the shift of focus of the federal government, is going to be a problem for us.
All right, that's got to go to the researchers.
I was gonna raise my hand, but yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe just meeting some folks at NETL, and obviously that's the National Energy Technology Laboratory that is more energy focused. They're concerned Some of their funds have been frozen related to certain things. It's the Inflation Reduction Act. Their research has just been put on hold. They don't know if they'll get it back. So surely at that level, if they're being impacted in a national lab, it could impact us. So that's my only tidbit. So am I concerned about it? Yes, I'm hoping that's produced water, maybe lesser degree, but I don't really have any more insight than anybody else in this room.
Just label that lab one more time.
National Energy Technology Lab. NETL, in Pittsburgh. National Energy Technology Lab.
National Energy Technology Lab.
So we had a lot of grants in and we got them funded and then they were frozen, but then they're all unfrozen, whatever, thawed now, I guess. So the money released. I think there's a big push for actually treatment and reusing water, because it could be an opportunity, because they're not going to stop oil and gas production, but I think it's pretty clear that they're also well aware of some of the challenges related to water management, especially in the Permian. And for that reason, they're trying to find solutions to better manage the water. And so I think that I see that personally as an opportunity, not as something that would adversely impact what we're doing. And then I also think there's a lot of great opportunities to work directly with industry at the sites. I mean, in order to do research, you have to be at the site, and most of these sites are operated by various industries and water managers. And I think we have had some really nice projects recently where we're able to actually demonstrate in the field what is possible, what's not possible. And yeah, so I think it's an opportunity.
Thanks for the question, Emma. So back to the question, anyone have heartburn on the approach? Aaron, do you have heartburn on the direction? Are we good to roll on this one, at least to see the first draft? Thumbs up. All right, I think you've got direction, Aaron.
Yep.
Careful what you ask for. So with that, appreciate the engagement on that and the different thoughts, and makes me happy that we have the folks on the consortium that we do. Hope, you want to talk about a review of our draft strategic plan, some of the accomplishments we've done over the last year, and prep us for the next meeting. This is really a prep for the next meeting. People's minds are already thinking about things that we need to be working on. I appreciate that they're already coming out. And so really I'm looking forward to our strategic planning, and Hope's gonna set the stage for us.
Thank you. I do have a little bit of cleanup to do. For the record, raise your hand online if we haven't introduced you yet. I'm going to go around the room just to record who's here.
James Rosenblum, academic seat.
Rick McCurdy's Lake Water Solutions. I sat in one of the experience in produced water seats.
Irene Andrews, Environmental Justice seat.
I think that's all in the room. Did we have any new people online?
Sorry. Didn't he? Oh, no, he was on time. That's it.
Joe Ryan, are you there? Doug Overton? Okay, sorry.
Joe Ryan's here.
And the other cleanup thing is there were a couple members of the consortium that attended the Produced Water Society meeting in Houston. James and Rick, do you have any comments from that?
But comments more of just, it was a pretty good collection. 200 people there, I think, at least from Tuesday all the way till about lunch yesterday. State agencies, midstream producers, researchers, a lot of new technologies. It's a really cool forum. It was my first time attending in person. And just a lot of different topics from pilots to seismicity issues to opportunities with other industries that are water needy and energy needy, like data centers. Just a really cool forum around produced water and really all of the innovative things that are happening in the research and really just the kind of the thought leaders in the space, particularly focused on the Permian Basin in West Texas. But obviously other folks who were talking about their consortiums like Hope, and it was just a really good informative meeting that I think I got a lot of.
Yes, I did too. And I'll add to that, and Barbara mentioned it earlier, that there was a lot of discussion, particularly one day we spent probably 3 or 4 hours through 3 different panels talking about ownership of produced water. And particularly with regards to any minerals that might be extracted out of that water. And the case that Barbara mentioned in Texas, and Texas has a slightly different water ownership system than we do here in Colorado, right? But there, it's the surface owner owns all the groundwater underneath their property. Mineral owner owns any minerals. Historically, the state and the courts have said produced water is essentially part of the mineral estate. It's just a waste product. That was challenged by a company that come in and signed a contract with a surface owner that said, we're going to take your produced water and do something with it. The oil and gas operator said, no, you can't. We do this, we do that. It went through a standard lawsuit, then it ended up being in an appellate court. The appellate court upheld that it was part of the mineral estate, but it was a split decision. Two judges ruled that. Third judge ruled in dissent that no, the way state law works in Texas as ownership, and they've had precedent said that water belongs to the surface owner regardless of the salinity content of that water. So the Texas Supreme Court has agreed to hear that case. They'll begin hearing arguments in March. And so ultimately they're going to make this decision, at least for Texas, as to who owns that state. I sat on a panel with a lawyer on either side of me discussing this for a full hour. And they just, as I kept saying, this is an onion with an unending amount of layers to it. You just keep peeling it back and there's another what if and a what if and a what if. So it's going to be really interesting, at least for the state of Texas, how this works out. But with regards to the minerals in that water, that could have implications for other areas as well.
Hey, Rick, it sounds like paradise for the lawyers in Texas.
Okay, so let's move quickly. And do you have the presentation up? And you should have a copy of this in your folder. If you want to see the slides while Emma and Aaron get the slides up. But we're going to review what we've done. We had House Bill 23-1242 create the consortium with the primary goal to reduce the use of fresh water, increase reuse and recycling of produced water. Some of the strategies were on slide 4. Some of the strategies in the bill was to create this consortium that serves as an informational resource to state agencies and the legislature. We also had some additional data collection requirements, as Arthur mentioned, some of those new data collection requirements. And then there will be new produced water rules developed by the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. So after our first meeting, we had 2 meetings where we developed our strategic plan. In your folders, you'll see a copy of the strategic plan that was developed with the help of Managing Results. Managing Results called and interviewed each of the consortium members that were appointed at that time and asked, what are the most important issues regarding produced water to you? Those interviews were analyzed and themes emerged, and we really looked at those themes at our October and November 2023 meetings, and then we developed this strategic plan. And beyond the strategic plan, we were curious. And we developed our strategic priorities. Our strategic priorities were 5 in number. The focus of 2024 was our first strategic priority, implementing legislative requirements. We have 4, well, not to discount our remaining implementation of legislative requirements. We do have 1 remaining July 1st report, which we reviewed the approach and approved the approach today. But for 2025 through 2030, we have these remaining strategic priorities, which include communities and the environment, research, education, and identifying regulatory and policy recommendations. These are going to be the focus of our strategic planning meetings that will be coming up. So beyond the strategic plan, we were curious. We looked at different regulations, water law. We identified where the data was. Over the past 18 months, we have learned a ton about produced water, about the data, about treatment, opportunities, geology. I mean, it's really cool to think back to 18 months ago when people didn't even really know what an oil and gas production basin was. And so it's really fun to see industry professionals sharing their experience, academics sharing their research in an understandable way. I loved Emma's comment that she understood what the doctor was saying, because I feel the same way. It was relatively new to me too. We learned about wildlife and environment and communities and belonging and just how do we capture that community voice. So I really appreciate all of that has happened over the year. And we began to develop this trust among consortium members and built our relationships so that we can be highly successful in the recommendations that we provide for policymakers, because it's capturing so many other voices. And that's what's unique about Colorado over New Mexico and Texas consortia, and even the emerging consortia in Oklahoma and Wyoming, is that we are capturing so many voices at the table, and leveraging the work of other states and sharing as well. One of the things that came out of 2024 was a statement that I just think bears repeating, because it is influencing all of our work and all of the consortium's work: the protection of public health, safety, and welfare, and the protection and preservation of the environment and wildlife. That makes Colorado a great place to live, recreate, and visit was in the forefront. There is an understanding among consortium members to present recommendations where the benefits of reuse and recycling of produced water is balanced with the potential risks. This came out of our work and it guides our work. So now to celebrate 2024 and 2023 were highly successful. We appointed members, we hired staff, we completed 8 of 9 legislative reports. We submitted recommendations that were based on best available data to the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And I believe that was one of the most exciting things, is that we could provide a data-informed recommendations to a regulatory body. It's something that Texas and New Mexico's consortium are really interested in. How did we successfully do that in a year? So, and a lot of people are interested in that. We're taking longer, but we're leading the way. We're leading the way. And I'm excited, John. And then not to mention, Beyond this, we did provide testimony at the Joint Ag Committee and the Joint Energy Committee during the Smart Acts of January 2024 and January 25. And we also submitted an annual report in April of 2024. So we've had regional collaboration. New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, and Oklahoma are sharing resources. This is really cool to see because usually we build up our silos, but the oil and gas production basins don't stop at the state line. And we really have brilliant minds working on potential opportunities and solutions. Also in 2024, we had the WRAP action item, which is EPA's Water Reuse Action Plan. And that is to compile regulatory, geological, legal, and health data from state and federal agencies. This is publicly available data. And so we've made a list so far of those publicly available data resources, and we're creating a visualization tool. As Harmony mentioned earlier, it's a story map, so it'll be online. And this can be an example of how to use publicly available data to inform policy recommendations for other states and the EPA to use. These next two slides really just show you how many reports we did. We started with a literature review in March. Then we looked at the regulatory landscape in May. In July, August, and September, we looked at infrastructure and availability of produced water. In September, we revisited what was our strategic priorities, and we shared that with the General Assembly. In September, we submitted our recommendations to the Energy and Carbon Management Commission for a timeline and targets. But we weren't done yet. In November, we identified barriers to the safe recycling and reuse of produced water. All of these legislative reports, the executive summaries are in your folders so that you can review kind of those recommendations over the years, because I believe they will inform our strategic planning work. In December, we submitted to the legislature short and long-term goals on increasing the reuse and recycling of produced water. For this year, we will have an annual report in April, and then that July 1st toxicological and analytical methods report. So what's next for the consortium? I think all of us have been giving you a preview. We're going to be strategic planning, and it will be on education, communities and environment, research, and identifying regulatory and policy recommendations. All of this will be fed by the strategic plan, so definitely review the strategic plan. They will have our strategic results. We'll need to create action items on how to achieve those strategic results. Many of those strategic results say by blank date, the consortium will. So I do want, it would be highly successful for me if we had that date to include in our strategic plan. That date can be out to 2030. As Commissioner Messner has mentioned, we're also revisiting those strategic results to see, are they still items that we need to work on? Have we already worked on these? Do we need to change them? And then just priorities for 2025's work. So what's listed on the screen are the strategic results under the strategic priority education. We're going to build the consortium's knowledge. We've been doing that for some time now. I don't know that anyone besides the people holding the produced water expert seats really feel like an expert of produced water. I certainly don't. I think we will continue to build the consortium knowledge for all of the years forward. We're going to provide the public with information on a regular basis, and that's, we've made some strides with our website and with the story map drafting. Engage communities in the consortium process and proactively outreach to impacted communities. For communities and environment, we're going to create tools and guidelines to identify issues, solutions, risks, and rewards, proactively engage and consider local government entities, tribes, and communities, provide guidelines that will identify communities impacted positively and negatively from produced water, identify and map points of imbalance and opportunities for reuse, recycling, and disposal of produced water and interbasin coordination collaboration. And the recommendations of the consortiums will proactively consider impacts on the environment. Again, this is the strategic results under the strategic priority communities and environment. For research, we're going to identify research and data gaps specific to the consortium's work, assess and report on the current state and the necessary state to achieve different levels of recycling and reuse of produced water within the oil and gas basins in Colorado, and working collaboratively with our partners, articulate the aspirational future state of produced water within the oil and gas basins in Colorado. So that's our research. And our final strategic priority is identifying regulatory and policy recommendations. We're going to identify these items which align to the consortium's goals. And we're going to identify and recommend to appropriate regulatory agencies minimum thresholds for reuse and recycling of produced water. Now, these are big strategic results. They emerged from interviews with each of you that was on the consortium at the time. And the action steps will say what we're actually going to do to achieve these results. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And on top of all of this, from the strategic plan in your folders is the executive summaries from the 8 reports that we've completed so far. And in those, we have recommendations for what the consortium should work on. Now, as you've heard from both me and Aaron, that's a lot of work for staff. And so just be really thoughtful about not giving us 15 items, Chair Messner. And really, I was happy you said 2, but maybe just 1, because we could have 31 different priorities for 2025. So I do encourage you to really think, what do I really want done in 2025? And what would make me feel like my work on the consortium is meaningful and successful in 2025? So I'll open it up for questions. Chair?
Thanks. So when we go into strategic planning next week, are we thinking just 25 or 25, 26? Are we going to do a 2-year chunk or a 1-year chunk?
I can take direction. I can take direction from the consortium.
Thanks. I like the idea of 2-year chunks, but that's just me.
Tessa Sorensen, governing body member in CDPHE. I have a couple of suggestions for you, Hope, in terms of maybe some approach that might make it easier on all of us as members. Is that maybe if you could possibly organize a survey of the consortium members about these particular items that we came up with in the strategic plan, with a focus on whether we think they've been already accomplished or partially accomplished or not at all, as well as which ones are continuous, like we should always be doing them over and over again. So they should be every year, like education of ourselves. Obviously, that should be all the time. Periodic or a one-time thing. As well as your date question. If we get kind of an overall feel through a survey, maybe we could share that at the next meeting, and it would make your job easier as well, because we're not trying to do all of that at once, and we can kind of give you that feedback in that amount of time. The other question I had is actually for AG Davenport, which is one of the items in here is about community engagement by the consortium. And so I'd ask that the AAG come to the next meeting prepared to maybe give us some advice on how the consortium could do that, not as all 31 members addressing members of the public, but as small groups or individuals, or if it's exclusively through the Director Dalton. So just so we can kind of know what we can and cannot do as a consortium. So that's my feedback there. And even the year question of, is it 2025 or 2025 and beyond, how far beyond? I think that survey might give us a really good basis for a discussion next meeting, so that we can have, or use the time the best.
Thank you. And Tessa, we think alike. I've already started designing this survey. So when you receive it, please participate, and it'll help narrow down some of the items. I will tell you, I don't like the word continuous. So we will not be doing anything continuously. We can educate on certain topics for each year or something like that, but there needs to be an end date so I can measure, are we successful or not? And then Kyle, did you have any comments about having a discussion at the next meeting about groups or not? Or should we take that offline?
In relation to consortium member sources, comment just now. Any consortium member can have an individual conversation with members of the community at any time without running foul of open meetings law. It becomes a little more complex when 2 or more consortium members start taking feedback from the community in the same time. We can resolve that by simply noticing it as an open meeting that the public could attend. But if the consortium would like to do something different, then we need to talk a little more in detail about it.
And so I would potentially put that public meeting on the website, and that's how we would notice it. And then I would send it to the public notification list. Barbara?
Yes, thank you. As we think about a strategic plan, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, whatever time frame the consortium settles on, one of the key questions is what our capacity is, both within ECMC regarding data collection and analysis to support us, and for the consortium itself. We talked about potential demonstration project for mining a class 2 well, for example. So if it's possible to provide some framing in what our budget and our capacity landscape looks like for the next 2 or 3 years, that will frame how aggressive we can be in setting goals in that strategic plan.
Thank you, Barbara. So some framing, and we're going to exceed the 12 o'clock meeting cutoff time. Do we need to say anything, Chair Messner, to the members of the public?
Exceeding the time? We're going to be exceeding the time.
Thank you, Chair Messner. I have my permission to go on. So Barbara and consortium members, this is what our budget looks like for the remainder of our fiscal year, which ends June 30th. We have funds to pay the stipends per diems and to host at least one meeting on the Western Slope before June 30th. That's the end of our fiscal year. So we'll likely have meetings every other month. One of them will be in person on the Western Slope. I have assigned that to Doug and Jeff. I don't want to put you on the spot, Doug, but is it safe to say that you're going to help plan our Western Slope meeting?
I'm not going to commit to that right now, but I'm looking at it.
I am begging for Doug's help, and thank you for answering. So that's why there are no meetings on the calendar yet, is because I'm trying to figure out how to have a meeting on the Western Slope. That's something that we committed to, and I'd like to get that one set up along with a tour. We're supposed to have at least 2 tours. We had one of the Lone Star facility. I'm going to put James on the spot now because I'm begging all the people to help me. But we're going to have another tour.
Yeah, so at the Water Technology Hub, which is about 1.5 miles from here, the School of Mines Water Technology Hub, yeah, happy to host a meeting and provide a tour of our pilots and demonstration scale equipment in that.
So that's another opportunity. Again, we don't have dates yet. That's why you don't have dates. But we're going to have at least 3 more meetings before June 30th. We might have 4. They might be virtual. At least one will be in person. James has offered another one, but that's what we're looking at. July 1st, our budget drops to just over $6,000. That covers stipends for 4 quarterly meetings virtually at the consortium. It does not cover any in-person meetings. So that's what we're looking at as you look at capacity and planning for the next year or 2 years and priorities. You're primarily going to be relying on staff because the consortium will only be meeting 4 times over the next fiscal year. Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Partly, and I appreciate you providing that lay of the land in terms of budget. I guess my question, and perhaps this is for the AG as well, is whether we can have virtual meetings in addition to what you had suggested in order to make decisions. I'm not sure what the cost is for a virtual meeting. So that's my question, whether we're really limited to quarterly meetings for virtual gatherings.
So that's a budget question. And the stipends that are paid are $50 per member for any meeting, whether it's virtual or in person. In person, we have to cover travel and accommodations and food. So in-person meeting increases the budget. The bare minimum.
It's the only way the virtual meetings could be increased is if the entire consortium agreed to waive their stipend. I understand now. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then my other question is in terms of ECMC staff support, and it's a question that can't be answered today, but a question for Commissioner Messner, whether they have the support to increase their capacity for analysis, gathering and analysis of the data that's so critical to us for basin by basin decision making. And I'll take an answer offline, Chair Messner, not here.
So Barbara, I can answer that for everyone. I'll work with ECMC staff to help give a report on capacity of ECMC staff to support any requests that the consortium makes. What I would request from consortium members is any request that you do make or want to make that requires ECMC staff, if they can be very specific, well-defined questions so that we can establish how much time those requests will take instead of open-ended questions.
Thank you so much, Hope.
And those questions should go through Hope. So if you do have questions of ECMC staff or specific data, then follow them through Hope, and then Hope will work with ECMC staff as far as determining capacity there. So thanks, Hope, for the presentation. Really appreciate kind of setting the stage. I don't know if folks remember, but we spent multiple days coming up with this initial strategic plan, and I thought it was a great process. It was a great opportunity for us to get to know each other, I'm a huge fan of Marv and Jeremy and managing results. We don't get them this time, but we get Hope, who's even better. So continue this thought process, review the documents, set the stage, and the next meeting I think will be a great opportunity to kind of reimagine what work we're going to be doing over the next couple of years or whatever time frame we decide. And I'll work on refining my ideas. Can I have one, two? I get two. And so, any final comments before we wrap things up? Really appreciate folks coming together here today. Great to see everyone in person. It's been a while since we've met. Thank you, Thomas and Sybil and CSU for allowing us to utilize this great facility. I'm really impressed with kind of the transformation that's happening here, and it's an exciting time. And so really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And we have a tour after this, is that right? And so we've got some lunch outside for folks that are going to stay and participate in the tour. Thanks everyone for joining us online. Great to have almost the whole consortium here. So any other last thoughts before we move on to lunch and tours? And welcome again to Carmia. And with that, I will call the February 14th, Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend Produced Water Consortium meeting to a close. So thanks everyone.
Thank you. Have a sweetheart of a day.